From the Asgard Company Studios in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, from the finest mind in the modern fitness industry, the one true voice in the strength and conditioning profession, the most important podcast on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, starting Strength Radio. Welcome back to Starting Strength Radio. It's Friday. So we're here because it's Friday. We're here every Friday. We're audio, we're video at startingstrength.com at noon. We're here with our friend Nick Delgadillo today, and we got an interesting topic that we're going to talk about today. Homeschool has been kicked around recently on the boards, and we thought we would just do a little podcast on homeschool. And as far as comments from the haters are concerned, fuck those guys. Fuck them. Bottom 2%, I think. I think I was being generous with 3%. I think it's bottom 2%. So we'll do that when the show means less. When I'm just doing a Q&A or something, we'll read comments from those. We know how much you enjoy comments from the haters. Not today. It's a waste of time. So, Nick, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome, Rip.
We've asked Nick to come on because Nick and Kathy homeschool their kids. And that's turned into a pretty interesting thread. It really has. A bunch of people have made a lot of points.
Well, it started because, remind everybody, it started because a high school student, a girl, softball player was injured when the coaches calculated that she could deadlift 285 pounds.
Calculated
through an app or computer or some shit. And they put her on the bar. She attempts to deadlift it. It doesn't break off the floor. So the coaches assist her, lift up the weight.
A forced rep with a weight she can't break loose from the floor.
And then let go.
And then, so, yeah, they, these people are dangerous. We're as we video this, that's right, it's not live. Spilled the beans, huh? As we videoed this yesterday, one of the coaches at one of the exemplary high schools here in Wichita Falls almost killed one of the girls on the track team. Kids being kids don't eat breakfast. You know, they get to school and they haven't eaten anything. And these geniuses decide that today we're going to superset high rep squats and lunges in the weight room. And then we're going to go out on the track and we're going to do a whole bunch of sprints, 15, 20 sprints.
Yep.
Girl was complaining of a headache, a severe headache, to the coaches. And as high school coaches are wont to do, run it off, yep. Whatever coach talk is for that. And girl collapsed, was unresponsive. Ambulanced her down to the embarrassing United Regional Healthcare Center. And they apparently resuscitated her. And she was, at some point, conscious. I don't know how she is today, but apparently they sent her home. She was dehydrated.
Yep.
But
it had been 80 degrees when it...
It's been winter,
yep.
And we've had 3 or 4 warm days.
Right.
And they're all sweaty and hot.
So they had a great idea to go outside and do all this shit.
Great idea to do all this shit in the weight room first.
Right.
And then go outside and make use of the gorgeous weather by finishing off the process of nearly killing one of the goddamn athletes at the school. And we know this because one of our members' daughter is also on the track team and accompanied the injured girl down to the hospital and kept us apprised of the situation. She was severely dehydrated. But my point is, they ignored the complaint from the kid. I have a severe headache.
Yep.
They made her train on through it. I have a severe headache. They didn't think to ask, what did you eat today? How much have you had to drink today? They're not familiar with the symptoms of potential neurological problems. So
it's not isolated to just Wichita Falls. I mean, this is
That's just
high school coaches all over the place. We've all experienced that kind of behavior. I mean,
sure.
and it's not just at that school, right? So there's
no, I mention it only because it's immediate.
It's immediate, and that's a real dangerous situation. But every day they've got kids doing. I trained a kid a couple of years ago here who was doing jumping squats, 225
with 225 pounds. A kid
jumping
who
squats
was encouraged to leave the ground with 225.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no danger of a dynamic compression injury there. Of course not.
One of my clients, they made him do an AMRAP with 275 on his back. He ended up doing like 13 reps, and he couldn't train for the next two times we were supposed to train together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I talked to a parent yesterday whose kid is in powerlifting, one of the high schools, 315. As many reps as you can get, 315 for 10. What's that kid's training going to look like for the rest of the week?
Mm-hmm.
It's not training.
He's a 160-pound kid.
It's not training.
It's exactly. It's just get in the gym.
It's not training. It's just fucking around in the gym with some high school coach watching.
Yeah.
I'm hard on high school coaches all the time. I'm hard on them in the podcast. I bitch about them in the seminar. And this is why. These people are dangerous. They're not very smart. Of course, there are a few good ones, but the few good ones know what I'm talking about, right? And just to preface our discussion today, if you're a parent and your kid comes home with some bizarre story about this having taken place, it's your job as the parent to react to it correctly, all right? This girl woke up yesterday, finally. But it could easily have gone the other way. And you know exactly what I'm talking about because we hear about this kind of shit all the time. Now, whose fault is this? Is it the kid's fault? She's a kid. She didn't eat breakfast. You're supposed to know she's stupid. She's a kid, right? But you're the coach, okay? And these people are apparently not capable of reasoning their way through a situation like this, and the environment is dangerous, and you as a parent need to think about this. Now, I started the podcast off today with this little anecdote because we are going to talk today about homeschool, and we're going to talk about what is a more pertinent generalization we can make to the whole system here.
Yeah, and fundamentally, it's kind of the same idea behind training and learning about training, and really anything else you do. It comes down to personal responsibility and making decisions based on the level of responsibility that you want to take. Because the first thing that there's a few things that people say, right, when you talk about homeschooling.
Yeah, let's that's an excellent premise. Let's flesh that out.
The personal responsibility thing.
They're your kids.
Right. Yeah.
They don't belong to the school system. They belong to you. They're your kids till they're 18. Now, if you don't want the responsibility and you're irresponsible, well, don't have the little bastards, okay? But since you had them, would you please act like they're yours? They don't belong to the school system. They're your kids. They're your responsibility. They're your responsibility. You're responsible for their safety. You're also responsible for their education. All right? And that has to be understood. That's the premise on which homeschool is built. Because the kids don't belong to the government. They belong to you.
And traditionally, it's been a religious thing, right? I mean, when I was a kid, the homeschool kids were all the fundamentalist Christian or the conservative Christian or Catholic people that didn't want the schools influencing their children, right? And that's fine. That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's a reasonable thing for them to think.
And when I was a kid, and even when I was younger, before I had kids, the idea of homeschooling was weird. The homeschool kids were considered weird. And a lot of that stigma is kind of still there. But the reasons are the same. And the last I've read, homeschooling is huge now. Lots of people are homeschooling, and not for religious reasons.
Because the public schools, the government schools, I don't refer to them as the public schools. They're the government schools. The government schools are so fucking bad. And everybody that's watching this podcast either works for the government schools or knows this. They're I mean, and it's not like we don't have any data. You know, it's not like we don't have any data.
And you have to make a distinction. So when we talk about the government schools, at least when I talk about the government schools, you know, I'm not condemning teachers, right? Because teachers don't become teachers to be bureaucrats. They become teachers because they want to teach kids and they want to educate people, and then they end up getting into this shitty system, and they end up just being at the whims of an administration, you know, that's top down from a government curriculum and all these requirements and bureaucratic bullshit that ends up not educating anyone effectively, right? And I went to a good school. I went to Catholic schools. My parents, you know, did a lot of stuff to be able to put us in what they thought were really good schools. But it's not much better. You know, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but it's not how people learn in a room full of other kids in your same peer group. But, you know, anyway, I just wanted to make the distinction that you know, teachers get all bent out of shape when you start talking about homeschooling.
Boy, they do.
Because it's like you're telling them that they're not worth a shit. And I'm not judging anybody's motives. I think that the motives are good, but they're not allowed to do their job, and it's one of the fundamental problems with public schools.
Right. You know, Nick, I think that you're right most of the time, but I think you're being charitable. I think a lot of teachers in the public schools, I've known them. I went to the government schools here in Wichita Falls all my life. I had several very good teachers. I had several very good teachers, but I had a whole bunch of dumbasses.
Oh, I did too.
Whole bunch of dumbasses who just wanted a job. They just wanted a job. If the teachers are very quick to criticize the system themselves. They don't look at it like that, but they're saying, well, we don't get paid but $50,000 a year, right? Do you know why they only get paid $50,000 a year? Because it's easy to get to be a teacher, and there are a lot of them laying around. It's easy to get to be a teacher. An elementary education degree, any kind of an education degree is, when I was in school, that's, you know, where all the morons were. We're in the education department.
They're in communications now.
They're in mass comm now.
Mass comm.
Yeah. Right. Well, they some more mass comm. You got a whole bunch of people who aren't worth any more than $50,000.
No, that's true.
Now, that doesn't mean every one of them, but I'm telling you.
But they've got to do more than just get a degree. They've got to do some other things. There's some motivation.
They should need to do some other things.
What I'm saying is that there was some motivation at some point to get into teaching, right? I mean, I'm just saying.
I think you're being charitable. I think that a lot of people wanted to be teachers, but I think a lot of people just wanted a job,
and they chose teaching
with some insurance, and they chose teaching because it was an easy degree. If you want to make teachers make more money, then just like any other supply, demand, price equation, you drop the supply by making it harder to be a teacher. Make the preparation more rigorous so that there are fewer people qualified to do the job. And then what must happen to the salary? Then it goes up. Okay, now that's just a general observation based on economics. But I'm telling you that when you've got a school system that wants to pay people $48,000 to be a teacher, why do they know they can get away with that? See what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, anytime you've got the government involved, you know, once you got a government job, it's hard to not have a government job anymore.
It really is. Yes.
You know, so I think my point stands and it's valid. beyond a certain point, once you're in once you're in the system, once you're a teacher, you're going to be a teacher as long as you want to be a teacher.
It's what seems to be the case.
Where if it wasn't that way, where everybody's forced to go to these schools, everybody's forced to go to the school within their district. In other words, there was a way for them to compete. I think you'd have a lot of the shitty teachers not be around anymore.
Well, recently I've heard several stories about good teachers getting pissed and quitting.
Yep.
And it appears as though the reason they're doing that is because the administration has decided, and they started doing this a long time ago, the administration has decided that the teachers are not allowed to enforce any kind of standards of behavior in the classroom. It's not the teacher's fault. They're getting as frustrated with that as everybody else is. But if the administration decides that teachers are not allowed to discipline their children, then you don't have a class. Right. You got a room full of people.
Yep.
And if I heard this bizarre story yesterday, the rule is that if there was a girl in the class that was acting up, and by acting up I mean turning over desks and throwing shit around and out of goddamn control, right? And the teacher was ordered to get up, get everybody else out of the classroom into the hall, and lock the door.
Yeah. Jeez.
I mean,
yeah.
If 10% of these stories we hear are true, public schools are not a learning environment anymore. Yeah. And that's what they're supposedly there for. But as you and I both know, there are a group of parents who don't take that responsibility we discussed earlier seriously and use the public schools as daycare.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess there'll always be
that
cohort.
People need to work, and so that's kind of what we were getting to at the beginning. There's the first thing people say is, we need the income. We need the income. So this isn't something that if your kids are already in school, in order to take them out, it takes dramatic changes to your life, right? So yes. What we did is, we decided before, before, I think even before the kids were even born.
You made plans.
Yeah, we planned for it, because I didn't want to put them in school. I had decided early on that I didn't want to put my kids in school, and we structured our life that way. So yeah, and this is something we discussed on the board there, but it's not feasible for everybody. But
no, we understand that.
Of course.
But by the same token, a lot of people for whom it is feasible have chosen to abdicate their responsibility. Right. And I'm not trying to indict you people. I'm just saying that there will be consequences to your decisions.
Yep.
And one of those consequences is the period of time during which a human being learns most easily is from the age of about 3 till the age of about 17 or 18. That's when things just soak in. That's when you learn languages easily. It's when you learn math easily. It's when you learn all the kind of things that need to be taught to people. They need that period of time to be spent in a quality situation so that they can maximize their potential. If you send your kids to the government schools to be babysat, then you're going to get babysat kids, not taught kids. And it's we
all know this.
We all know this.
You know how much learning you actually did in school. And not only that, when you left every day, how much of it did you retain? And when you left at the end of the year, how much of the shit that you learned that year did you retain?
And one of the most important things that you can remember is remember when you got home and your mom said, "What'd you learn in school today?" And you said, "Oh, nothing."
But you
weren't lying, were you?
No, you weren't lying. But you could tell her everything that happened on the playground.
Yeah. You tell her all that shit.
Yeah.
You tell her about the kids you beat up in the bathroom and shit like that.
Or that beat you up.
Or that beat you up in the bathroom. You about getting shanghaied in the parking lot on the way out to on the way out to recess and shit like that. But when she asks you what you learned at school today, you know,
the things that you learn are things that you want to learn, right? I mean, otherwise you're just kind of getting through the process. You're just doing whatever you need to do to get through the day and get through the year or get through the month without getting your parents up your ass and getting the teachers up your ass.
You're just punching a ticket, aren't you?
And that's what in my mind, that's what school teaches you to do. It teaches you how to get by. Mm-hmm. At least for me, you know, I got really good at getting by with doing the bare minimum. And I was good at it.
Skate through the day.
Very good at it.
Learn how to skate through the day. Huh?
Yep. So I could go about learning shit that I wanted to do and doing things that I wanted to do, you know?
Right.
So it's the income thing. It's the people feeling like they're not qualified to teach. And I think we're hitting on that already, you know? Mm-hmm. I mean, the idea that somebody else is qualified to teach your children better than you is a fantasy.
That's an odd,
especially at that age that you just discussed, that you just talked about. I mean, there's going to be a point where you can't teach your kids something anymore. You know,
if you don't know it, when it comes time to teach Calc 1, maybe you're not qualified.
But it's 2020, and there's resources available that can teach your kids Calc 1 if they want to learn Calc 1.
If they want to learn Calc 1, they're not going to want to learn Calc 1 unless they're exceptional kids in a modern government school situation, because they don't have to.
They don't have to, right?
They don't have to, and it's not encouraged.
Yeah, I mean the prerequisite for graduation is like pre-algebra or some shit.
Yeah,
I don't think you even need to have
I think
algebra.
we had to have Algebra 1, and then Algebra 2 was an elective.
Yep.
So most people didn't do it. Calculus was offered in my school, but nobody ever told me I'd need calculus.
Right.
You know how many times I talked to a counselor my whole 4 years in high school?
Probably once.
None.
Zero.
They have 3 people or 4 or 5 people in the counselor's office up there, and none of us could ever figure out what the hell those people were there for. Yeah. I was never counseled.
Yeah.
You know, you would think, you know, you'd have a counselor's appointment one day, and you'd go in, and the counselor would say, "Hi, Mark.
What do you plan on doing?
How are you? You
do you
seem like a bright kid.
Yeah.
You're doing all this right now. Do you want to go to college? What do you want to do in college? Oh, you want to be a science major in college. You know what science you want to do? Well, it's not necessary. But if you want to be a science major and you haven't decided yet, then here's some things you might want to think about. You need to do while you're here in high school. You need to take 4 years of math. I took 4 years of math anyway, because I figured that anything I hated that bad, I was going to need to know how to do.
Yep.
Right? But nobody ever told me that. Nobody ever told me that if you're a science major, you're going to have calculus in college, and it'd be better if you took calculus in high school. It would be better for you if you took calculus in high school. Not one person.
Yep.
No teacher, no counselor ever told me that. And this was 45 years ago, before the schools got to be as shitty as they are now. And, I primarily think that, as with most problems with government-operated things, the problem is not with, for example, the field agents in the FBI. The problem is the administrative structure of the FBI.
Yep.
And it's the same with every government institution. People that are running the schools at the administration level, they don't care about anything except keeping their job and about getting another school bond issue passed.
And funding. Yeah, what's the most important thing that happens here every year in Texas? I mean, I didn't. Every year, the STAR test. I don't even know what that is, but it's some kind of standardized test, I'm sure.
Stupid standardized
But you
test.
hear about this. I don't have kids in school, but I hear about the STAR test for weeks until it happens, and then it's a big deal. It happens, and I guess that's the metric by which the school district or the school or the teachers or whatever are judged and whether or not they get a budget next year or whatever it is. It's we had standardized tests in school, and it was, again, the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about learning. It's about
passing
the test, or the school getting a certain score on the test.
Well, and then the second most important thing that happens here in Texas, and probably where you are too, is that every 5 years, the school superintendent will go to the school board and demand that they issue another school bond. We had a bond issue.
Yep.
They need $57 million.
Right.
Because if they don't have $57 million, the schools are going to fucking fall down.
Yeah. And everybody
they're going to collapse.
Everybody will be illiterate.
Everybody will be out in the yard because the roof is caved in on the schools that they somehow failed to maintain. Everybody be illiterate. Everybody's got to have a computer. Everybody's got to have a brand new air-conditioned school building. All this shit over here needs to be consolidated and abandon that building over here.
Yep.
And if if I was more cynical, I might be inclined to think that school superintendents are hired on the basis of their ability to get a bond issue passed.
No.
Why I'd hate to suggest something like that, but I'm afraid, it's occurred to me before. So,
the government thing, that's a big problem, right? But it's not just isolated to government schools because anybody who runs a school is still going to be subject to Department of Education stuff, the state boards, all this other shit. So It's just rampant. It's everywhere.
Right.
Charter schools, whatever. It's just the whole thing is all messed up. So reason number one, you don't want your kids in a government school. You don't want your kids subject to some arbitrary curriculum that somebody decided is going to work. Where did that curriculum come from? Whoever had the best bid, whatever it is, whoever decided this is the thing that we're going to teach, that might not be the best thing. It's not the best thing.
It might not be, but I think that at some level there is an argument to be made for a classical liberal arts education like you would receive at St. John's in Santa Fe, where everybody in the school goes through and learns all the same shit.
Yep.
Everybody takes classical Greek. Everybody takes classical Latin. Everybody reads the Odyssey in the Greek.
Yep.
Everybody takes Calc 2. Everybody has chemistry and physics. Everybody.
Yep.
Everybody deals with various humanities topics. But they're at this level here instead of this level right here.
Exactly. And not everybody's going to be able to do that.
No. But everybody has to go to the public schools, and people want to go to St. John.
Right. Exactly.
Right. It's a completely different environment. Yep. And if you are going to shove everybody into the same education system and then make the level here, because this is how we pass the most number of people and make our numbers look good, then you've got a series of motivations that descend from the bureaucracy and not from the best interest of the students.
Exactly. Yeah, by default, it's going to be lowest common denominator.
Yes.
It's going to be designed to get people through. And the point here is that for anybody, I guess who I'm talking to now is anybody who thinks that homeschooling would be a good idea or the idea is appealing, that is concerned that they're not qualified to teach their own children.
Right.
Because the curriculum at school, the school is set up for babysitting, like you said, and it's set up to pass as many people as possible.
The school is set up for the people who are, it's the bell curve, just like everything else.
Of course.
The normal distribution, top of the bell curve is a C. That's who we're worried about. I've heard them say this 1,000 times.
Of course.
We're not worried about the A students on this tail over here.
They're taking care of
They're taking care of themselves.
Right.
And we're not worried about the people over here that are failing because there's nothing we do to help them.
Special ed program.
Yeah.
For them.
Right.
Yep.
So we're worried about
Sure.
teaching the things that the person with 100 IQ can understand without ever challenging them, and you know, I can already see the comments from the haters rolling in. I'm a public school teacher, and you don't know what the hell you're talking about, Rip. And besides, you're fat, right? I can see it all already, you know. But you know what? Public school teachers that are going to be offended by this, we all know you. It's not your fault, okay? But that you're not held to a higher standard. It's the administration's fault, and there are just motives here that are insurmountable. And the only way to guarantee that your kids, and you know this because you may homeschool your own kids. Probably not if you're a public school teacher, but you may.
Some of them do.
You may have them in private school.
No,
you may have them in private school.
There's plenty of public school teachers. I know a couple of them who will not put their kids in their own schools.
Right. No, I know that's true. I know that's true. So we're not indicting. What we're indicting here is the system. And the system can't be fixed. The idea that parents aren't qualified to teach their own kids is a way that the status quo reinforces itself.
That's right. Yep.
Because they want to intimidate you into giving them your kids. Because after all, we got
it. Yeah, it's convenient for them, and it's also convenient for it's convenient for people to think that. I've talked to very smart people when I've discussed homeschooling with them, and like, how am I supposed to teach my kid this? How am I supposed to teach my kid that? And my answer is always, look, if your job required. I remember talking to a very, very smart guy that I worked with, and my kids were really small. They weren't even in school yet, and they're like, "What are you going to do for school?" I said, "We're going to homeschool." Aren't you worried about that? So socialization, right? There's that. Yeah. We'll talk about that later. Yeah. But then, how am I going to teach my kid algebra? And I said, "Look, man, if your job required you to learn algebra, could you learn algebra?" Well, yeah. You're going to learn algebra real damn quick.
You had it yourself, right?
Right.
Remember?
Right.
Remember? You made a B in it. It wasn't that hard.
Yeah. In other words, if it was important, if it was something that you needed, if it was a tool that you needed, if it was some knowledge that you needed, if it was something that you needed in your life, you'll learn it.
You'll figure it out.
And you're 40. It's hard for you to learn shit now. A kid is like programmed to learn, to absorb and learn. And they just learn. That's all they do. They just learn things. And there's a I don't want to misquote, but there's one of the guys, one of the big names in homeschooling. I believe this guy was a like New York State Teacher of the Year. But he would always he had a quote that was like, if the schools taught children how to speak, it would take 2 years, and most kids would never learn how to speak.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah,
and who taught them how to speak?
Nobody. I mean, they just did it because they
copied their parents.
Exactly.
They copied their parents. Yeah. Their parents taught them to speak.
Yeah. All you have to do is point the kids in the direction. And look, some parents are more really hands-on and strict with what they do and how they do it in curriculums and stuff. We're kind of the opposite. We're not, we don't have like every day for 2 hours we're going to do school. Like, I'm not trying to recreate school at home. But, my point is, the first thing that really validated this whole thing to me is my kids learning to read. I didn't teach them how to read. I didn't. Me or Kathy didn't spend a single moment saying, "Here's an A and it sounds like this." We had books everywhere, and we read to them. She read to them, and then they would pick up books and just stare at them. They couldn't read, but they would just stare at them and flip through them. And then one day, I don't remember. Jackson was like 6 or 7, and he just like read a sentence. Like, holy shit, he's reading.
He just woke up.
And then my daughter sees this and wants and is like, oh shit, I'm behind now. And she learned how to read faster than he did. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I'd read about that kind of stuff happening for years leading up to it. You never really believe it. And then I saw, I was like, shit, man, we don't have to worry about this. They'll be fine.
They're gonna be fine.
They're gonna be fine. And if there's something they need to learn, if they're interested in it, they're going to learn it. So my job, if there's something they want to learn, they're going to learn it. They have to be interested in it, though. It can't be something that's tedious. All you have to do is point them in the right direction, give them the tools, give them the resources, and they'll learn it.
Well, the idea that they can't learn it without the help of a professional educator,
that's right,
is that's just propaganda that reinforces the system. And it's useful, though. it's useful to reinforce the system. If you'll step back and look at the system, you'll see the nature of the problem. You've got a tax structure in every independent school district in the world, in the country, and the tax is normally determined on the value of real property, and people are taxed whether or not they have a kid in school. I've been paying taxes on the government schools for decades. I don't have any kids, and in a normal rational world, it could be justified that I'm investing in society. And if that were actually true, I would be happy to do it. But I'm not investing in society by furthering the aims and the continuance of the government schools, because they're not doing their job. They're not doing their job. Now, if they were doing their job, it would be more palatable, but they're not doing their job. It would be much, much better if I were allowed to take the money, the property tax money that I pay every year to 2 or 3 different independent school districts where I own property, and take that money and scholarship a kid to an apprenticeship program, or to give some financial aid to parents to homeschool that really were taking a big giant hit on the lost income of whoever's doing the homeschooling. That would make a lot more sense to me in terms of an investment in society. But the way it is right now, if you cut these bureaucrats out of the system, they're going to, by God, they're not going to like that.
Yeah, and there's a nice feedback loop too, because there, you've got this whole thing going on, and then how do you whether there's nefarious motives or not on the underlying thing here, there's a feedback loop where you've got a system set up, and then what are the metrics? So you have a teacher delivering a lesson, and then you've got quizzes, you've got homework, and the metric is what comes back. The homework, the quiz comes back. What's the score on that? Has any learning actually occurred there? You don't know. The teacher doesn't know. How do they know whether the kid learned or something? They learned it enough to do that thing, that task today.
So let's talk about the structure of a school classroom.
Well, yeah. So
because this is a terribly important topic. There's a lot of things about homeschooling that are better than the classroom, that advocates of the government schools will say kids can't get anywhere except in a classroom full of another bunch of little stupid kids, right? Socialization, peer relationship. Let's talk about learning first, and then let's talk about the socialization aspect, because these are brought up all the time.
Yep. Well, in terms of learning, I mean, you're getting, you are there, you're involved in the process, right? That's the critical thing here. You're involved in the process, going back to personal responsibility. So you are looking at your child, and you can tell whether or not they're learning something, right? If they're engaged, if they're interacting with the material, and they're talking about it with you or with each other or whatever. I mean, it's real time, right? You're not looking at a report card.
Right.
3 months from now.
And you're not looking at 35 other kids.
And 35 other kids.
At the same time, trying to gauge the engagement, trying to assess the engagement of all of those kids with the material. Yeah. They're your kids. They're right there. You know them.
Right. And things were different when you were probably in elementary school, because I think, teachers didn't fuck around. But I was, and when I was a kid, it was pretty serious. I had nuns and stuff, and I think the nuns hit us and things. They're not to be messed with. But
no, our teachers would. Oh yeah,
physical violence. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you were threatened with physical violence, not just for fun, but if you disrupted the classroom. Yeah, she'd stand you up, whack you on the ass, and set you back down.
Or just embarrass you.
I have always said that licks You know, when the guy hits you with the big paddle. The licks, wham! Right? Everybody remembers that. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people remember that. What the coaches would do if Miss Mauser, my English teacher, had to call for one of the coaches to come get you out of class and give you 5 licks, he would come into the room because you were fucking up. She had to do that. You would stand up, you'd go out in the hall and get your 5 licks in the hall.
Oh, God.
In the hall. The licks are not for you. The licks are for everybody else in the school because they can hear that.
Jesus.
The licks echoed down the hall. Wham! Wham! 5 licks. All right, go back in the classroom. Everybody in the classroom's behavior is now reinforced. Yeah. Everybody in all the other classrooms' behavior is now reinforced. The licks aren't for you. They're for everybody else, right? And if you are dealing with large groups of people, many of whom are sub-rational, physical pain is there for a reason. Physical pain is a very, very important learning mechanism for vertebrates. Not just for little kids, but for all vertebrates. Pain is a learning tool. And there's no reason not to make use of it. But now we can't do that.
Well, what you have now is, what you'll see is there's a room full of 30 kids, and who is the teacher focused on? The ones that are making the biggest fucking racket.
Pain in the ass.
The biggest pain in the ass is the ones who aren't getting it, the ones who are disrupting the class. You know, that's who gets all of the attention.
Right.
And you got the A students over there that are going to be fine
They're
regardless.
all going.
They're going to be fine regardless.
Right.
And you got all these middle of the bell curve kids
that
are just sitting there. You know, some of them are just getting along. Some of them might be learning something.
Oh, but this might be an important place to make the observation that should be perfectly obvious to everyone, that not all human beings are of the same intelligence. All right? There are slow kids, there are fast kids, there are average kids. Now, if we can't agree on that basic observation about human beings, then the rest of this whole discussion is pointless. But I think that the rational people that we're engaged with here on this podcast understand that there are varieties, there's variation in terms of people's capacity for intellectual stimulation, for intellectual understanding. All right. Once we establish that, then we can establish the fact that a 35-member class.
Yeah. How does it break out?
How does it break out?
Yeah.
Because it has to be addressed.
Impossible. It's just impossible.
And if you're dealing with your 2 or 3 kids at home, then the adjustments are automatic. Yeah. And are much easier and actually can be done because a teacher dealing with 35 kids in a classroom can't physically.
It's like
not possible.
It's no shit. It's babysitting. You know, there's some teaching going on, but at the end of the day, how many hours of learning are going on at school every day? An hour?
Yeah, maybe
2 hours. I don't know. You know,
maybe.
So if you take that time and you do it at home, you can get a lot done with 2 kids in 2 hours. You can get a lot done in 1 hour.
Yeah, in fact, you can. Just as a personal observation, I learned how to write in junior high. 7th and 8th grade English were where I learned how to write. We had 2 older women that taught us, who put up with zero bullshit. Yep. Everybody in the room diagrammed sentences. Everybody in the room did reading assignments and wrote reports. Everyone in the room. She didn't tolerate you not turning in your homework. That wasn't allowed. And I think the class was managed in a way that ensured the highest level of performance from even the people over here on this end of the tail. In contrast, I didn't learn a single thing in high school English that I remember. I didn't learn a single solitary thing. We were not taught grammar in high school English. And I don't know if the school system intended it that way, or if I know that my freshman English teacher was one of these people that just had this as a job.
Yep.
I assure you, I remember it clearly. He had no idea what was going on. I remember he had us read a story one day that had a weird ass ending, and we said, "Well, Mr. Berry, what does that mean?" And he said, "I don't know." I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me either. And we're all going, "Well, why did he have us?
Yeah.
Why was And the rest, I think we mainly explored literature in high school, but we didn't deal with any grammar at all. And I learned how to write in junior high. And but in terms of what did I learn in high school?
Whatever you wanted to learn, whatever you were interested in.
I don't remember learning a hell of a lot about it. Now, we did have an interesting class in high school. When I was a senior, we had one of the science teachers, Mr. Reed, and the assistant principal were the co-owners of an airplane, a 1947 Taylorcraft. And we had what was essentially, we had about 15 people in the class. They invited several of the students to be in the class, and they invited me to be in the class, and we went to ground school.
Yep.
We went to actual ground school in the class, and we flew the airplane.
Yep. Nice.
Everybody had a plane ride at the end of the semester. We had, everybody got to go up and fly the airplane,
right,
and calculate a course and all this. Now, that was cool.
Yep.
That was cool. You can't do that at home.
And things you won't forget.
Right. The things I remember.
Yeah.
45 years later, I remember that.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of what happened at high school, I have long since forgotten because it didn't make any difference to me.
Yep.
And so I don't know. Most people my age remember the social stuff that we did in high school.
Of course.
And because it was fun.
You remember the social stuff. You remember the classes,
the girlfriends. You remember the
classes where you had a teacher that you really liked.
You do remember that.
You remember the subjects that you were personally interested in.
Yes.
And that's about it. That's about it.
Right.
You could probably refresh yourself on things. We deal with this every month. Everybody's taking physics in high school, and not a single one of them. Well, a lot of people that come to our seminars have taken physics in high school.
They had physical science.
And
that seems to be a freshman requirement.
And they don't remember.
They
don't remember the physics. They don't remember the moment arms. I mean, we're going through and talking about gravity as if these people have never heard it before, and it's all new,
Right.
But again, we can cover it in an hour. And to bring it into our world, a coach can learn it in a short amount of time because there's context, because they're interested in it.
Well, because we're better teachers than they are.
Because we're better teachers than they are, and also because it's pertinent to something they want to learn right now. They want to learn how to do barbell stuff, so they have to learn this aspect of it. And all of a sudden, it's in context and it makes sense, and the learning has an outcome that is immediately pertinent to something that they want to do.
Well, let's go back to the socialization part.
Yep.
Though, because
that's the big one.
As I said, I had a lot of fun in school because I had a lot of friends in school, and your social relationships are formed at school. A lot of them continue on to this day. I still got a buddy I talk to that I went to school with for 6 years in the government schools. He and I are still friends. But there's a whole lot of shitty people that I remember having to interact with.
Yep.
One of the big baseball bats they want to beat you over the head with in terms of homeschooling is the lack
of
socialization.
Right. Yep.
So what do you think about that?
Well, the the first thing that comes to mind is when. So everybody's in terms of socialization. Everybody's worried about when your child is an adult. Are they going to be able to interact with, whoever, their employers, their coworkers, whatever, right? But at what point in your adult life have you ever been thrown into a room with 30 other people your exact same age and been forced to interact with those people with one person at the front telling you what to do? It's a made up social situation.
It's not analogous to human behavior.
To real life, to anything right. In real life. And the social structure at school is such that the things that make people valuable and important within the peer group, right? So you got 20 kids. The thing that makes a particular person valuable is what? What they wear, what shows they watch, just whatever bullshit kids come up with
right.
that they think is important. Which YouTube person they follow. So these are the things that are important to kids. So that's how the social groups are formed. What sports they play, whatever. But this doesn't happen in real life ever after school.
No.
Right? And kids go through school for 12 years having never experienced like real life.
Right.
And then they get to college and there's more of that, but there's a little bit more mixing and then shit just goes haywire. It just goes crazy, right?
When I was in high school, there were several elementary schools that fed into fewer junior high schools that fed into the even fewer high schools.
So yeah.
And what we ran into were cliques that were formed
right.
in elementary school, continuing through to the 12th grade. And you couldn't, if you were outside that structure,
yep.
you were nothing.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's not what you find as an adult.
Yeah, because an adult, what you actually contribute matters.
Yes.
Like what you can actually do matters.
Not
right?
where you went to grade school.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's about things that are important. And if these things aren't important, then the situation you're in isn't worth a shit, right? So your performance, what you can do, your value that you bring to where you work or in your own personal work, and just how valuable you are as a person. These are the things that matter. So why not start instilling those ideas early on, like when the kid is 5, not when they're out of college, because the first time somebody thinks about that stuff in the current situation is when they receive their bachelor's degree. Now I got to go operate in the real world, and these people have no. I mean, I've interviewed these people. They have no fucking idea about anything.
What is expected of them.
Right, and if
idea that we're not going to allow you to make a C.
Yeah, right.
On this thing I'm having you do at work, a C is not good enough. Yep. Whereas in school it was just fine.
Right.
But the classroom organization, I mean, if you step back and look at this, classroom organization is strictly and only for the convenience of organizing this huge group of kids. That's all it's for. There's not any other situation in which a human being will find himself where everyone in the group is at the same level, is at the same age, is at the same level of maturity, is at the same level of intelligence, is at the same level of physical development. There's not anything like that except the government schools.
That's right. Yeah. And it's a product of the Industrial Revolution, right? I mean, this was all just a way to make good factory workers. Right? I mean, think about it. You got bells, you got schedule, and this is the result. This is what we have. Because how did they do it before?
Lunch
that?
is at 11:32.
Yeah, how did they do it before that? You had kids in one school with a couple of teachers, and everybody was mixed ages, and they all went to school together. Mm-hmm. And I mean,
the one-room schoolhouse model.
Have you read the letters? From the
that actually works pretty good.
Sure. Have you read letters from Civil War people? The handwriting and the letters?
They're actual literate people.
Yeah.
They actually know.
Sure.
They knew how to write better than. I mean, they're all writing at the level of Charles Dickens.
And there was a lot of there's a lot of illiterate people back then,
Yeah.
but the people that were in school got a lot out of school.
Yes.
But it's not.
But it wasn't set up the way it is now.
Right.
Because the whole structure back then was different. A community, a small town would get together.
Everybody knows the teacher.
And everybody would chip in and build a schoolhouse. Sure. Everybody would chip in and hire the teacher.
Yeah. Right.
And everybody sent all of the kids. You had 16-year-old kids in the same room with the 5-year-old kids. And those kids had responsibilities. They took care of the little kids
Right.
when the teacher was fooling around with somebody else. And that was a far, far more realistic situation in which young people were to learn, which is much more thoroughly replicated by a homeschool
That's
situation.
right. Because those kids weren't at school from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., right? I mean,
Right.
at the one-room schoolhouse, school was a couple of hours, and then because the kids had to work.
Right.
So they spent the rest of the day with adults doing adult things.
Learning what was expected of them.
Exactly.
Learning the standards to which they were expected to perform, that sort of
and
thing.
how to be productive in real life. You
Yes.
know, and so the education part was actual education, where the rest of this school thing wasn't the dominant aspect of their existence like it is now, right? Because you go to school, you wake up as a kid, you wake up at 6, you're at school at 8 o'clock. You're there till 3. Maybe you play sports. Maybe your parents can't come get you until after work at 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
So you're now at this school for 11 hours. And then you go home, and the government still has their little hands in your life because now you have to do 2 hours of homework at home, right?
Right.
So it's just the dominant the dominant aspect of your entire life for 12 years, if not more.
12 years that you're learning that
How to be a good subject, I
that
guess.
you are supposed to do. Kids need to learn that there are things they're supposed to do. I'm not here to suggest that authority's not important. But the authority should not come from
It shouldn't be arbitrary.
the bureaucracy.
Right.
It should come from the parents.
Yep.
It really, really should. And, we talk about apprenticeship because we're here at the Asgard Company. We're invested in the apprenticeship model because that's how we have found that the best coaches have been produced. The best coaches don't come out of the master's degree program in the exercise physiology department. People get a master's degree out of the exercise physiology department, and they walk in the gym ready to coach nobody. They're ready to coach no better than a lay person off the street. What's the first thing we're going to do? Well, they don't know. They don't know about barbell training because it's not part of the curriculum. So we got to teach them that. And we've gotten pretty good at teaching this stuff. But in an apprenticeship program, once again, you find a distribution of abilities and a distribution of people of different levels of skill and experience working with each other in this program, and it doesn't look like the public schools.
Right.
I mean, there are similarities in that there are desks and there are classes and stuff, but the people sitting in the desk all want to be there. They've chosen the profession, and they're interested in it. And even if they're not interested in it, they are vested in it. They are in a position where they have decided they are going to learn this trade. And they might be 19, they might be 28, might be just recently having thrown into a situation where they've had to change jobs. So you've got a whole variety of people in a situation like that.
And there's value coming from both sides. So you've got at the beginning, the apprentice derives all the value from the experience of the person they're apprenticing with. But then over time, the person who is doing the apprenticing is deriving some benefit from the apprentice too, because you're bringing that person up. Hopefully, they end up better than you. And not only that, but they're
working for you.
They're working for you.
They're producing value while they're learning, which is a completely absent feature of the government school.
Rather than waiting 14 years and then now you're productive, or you can try to be productive, right? You can attempt it, right? Now you got to learn all these fucking real life skills,
right?
14 years after you could have been doing. And this is the thing we always talk about is, why go to a 4-year university? Get a PE degree, and then start becoming a coach. When you could have, and by the way, you're $40,000, $100,000 in debt, right? And you have no skills, where you could you could get this process done for $5,000 maybe, including the cost of seminars and coach course and all that stuff. But at the same time, you're gaining experience as a coach, where if you don't come out as a starting strength coach at the end of the thing, you've still gotten all this benefit and value out of the process.
Sure, and you can charge money for your services.
Of course. Right.
Even because you're a better coach, you're a better barbell coach than anybody else. Yep. You just haven't met our standard yet. But
sure.
Look at Chase.
Yep.
Chase started with us when he was 12.
Yep.
He was a nasty little fucking pale, blonde-haired little kid.
He still is a nasty.
Well, he's not little anymore.
Well, he's not little anymore. But he didn't miss workouts. He was tenacious.
Yep.
And he has developed into the youngest starting strength coach in the world. He's 22 now. He's starting strength coach. Kid's a good coach. And he didn't learn any of it in school. He learned it at the gym from us.
Yep.
And it works. Apprenticeship's an extremely valuable thing if you can obtain one. I get people calling us all the time wanting to be interns at the gym. And this fascinates me. They seem to know that they haven't learned anything in their degree program. It's occurred to them that they haven't learned anything in their degree program. What hasn't occurred to them is the idea that for me to put up with them hanging around the gym, I'm going to have to derive something of value from them that they are unable to offer. Now, why would I allow somebody that hasn't read my book and hasn't been to my seminar, that hasn't got a 185 squat, thus demonstrating commitment, why would I allow them to come in my gym and learn from me? What do I get out of that? I mean, it's got to, right? They're wanting me to parent them. Right? They call it internship. But what they really mean is they want me to parent them. And that process apparently didn't get done in the government schools. Didn't get done in their degree program, didn't get done in the government schools. Had they been homeschooled, they might know better than to ask me such a question. Don't call the gym and ask if there are internships available, because there aren't. Okay?
So to bring this back to the homeschooling thing and actually the apprenticeship thing is perfect because and I've explained this to people multiple times, because now you've got this bullshit where, depending on where you live, they're gonna force your kids to go to like a God, what did they call it? I was talking to somebody in Seattle, and they wanted to put the 9-year-old girl in, I don't remember the name, but basically teaching her about the 38 different genders, right? And talking about what's racist and what's not racist.
They got a socially
bullshit.
Right.
But that happens. It happens here. It happens in Dallas. It happens in Austin. It happens everywhere. So you also extricate yourself from that kind of bullshit too, where you have to unteach your kids this crazy shit that people want to indoctrinate with.
No, Jackson. There's boys and there's girls. On rare occasions that you'll never see, sometimes somebody's born that's kind of in a different situation than that, but the vanishingly small number of them. But everybody's either a boy or a girl, and there are certain behaviors and certain characteristics and certain potentials that are associated with being either a boy or a girl, and that's worked just fine for the past 80 million years.
And regardless, the 9-year-old doesn't give a shit.
And the 9-year-old,
the 9-year-old doesn't care. Like the 9-year-old, they have a better idea about this stuff than we do. So the thing is, when you are homeschooling, you're doing an adult apprenticeship with your kids. That's what it
That's
is.
the very best
That's what
way
it is.
I've ever heard it described.
Because you're guiding them.
Adulthood apprenticeship is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, when you're doing an apprenticeship with somebody, you don't control every aspect of their lives. They bring something to the table, and for a little kid, what they bring to the table is just this fucking massive willingness to learn things. That's all they want to do. You know, from
willingness and capacity.
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 From the moment they come out, they're learning shit. You know, and you put them in school, and that's the best way to kill that drive in a child.
Yes.
Is to put them in
to
school.
Bore them.
Is to bore them to death, right? So
is to bore them to death. A kid is naturally curious and naturally wants to learn stuff. They like to read. Right. They want to check out library books. They want you to explain things to them. They have questions that they want answered. And you stick these kids in the government schools, and you take a wet blanket and smother them.
Yeah.
I loved science until I met my 8th grade science teacher, Miss Warren. My first exposure to public school was that, and she was a raging bitch. Hated science after that.
Sure.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to turn a kid's interest away from something.
Yep.
They think they're going to have that interest answered by an adult in the government schools.
Doesn't happen.
And the adult is a psycho.
It doesn't happen.
And it doesn't happen.
Yep. And if you approach things this way, what you'll find is that your kids are generally well adjusted. They can talk to adults. You know, I mean, they you know, most kids, an adult, you walk up to a kid and they're going to hide behind their parents, especially you know.
Yeah.
But you know, they're comfortable talking, even though they're saying silly kid shit, but they're still comfortable talking to adults.
Yeah.
And that's almost universal with homeschool kids.
Yes.
And the homeschool kids that are weird because their parents are weird. You know, and not to say that the homeschool kids that are smart.
They came by it honestly.
Sure.
You know?
And not to say that the homeschool kids that are smart because their parents are smart, whatever. But the point is that it's going back to the beginning here. It's personal responsibility and having a willingness to put some fucking skin on the line and say, I'm going to try to do this. And if I fuck it up, you're still probably going to end up better off than handing them off to the government. It's
like starting strength at 50%. Correct. It's still better than anything else.
That's right.
What it basically boils down to is, look, you made them. They're yours. They wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. You don't get to just make them and then throw them over here. All right? Because if you do that, they're not going to be as good as they were if you kept them here. And this is a responsibility issue. Do you want the responsibility? If you don't want the responsibility, you know, I hate to be this way, but God damn it, just get a VAS job. You know, have yourself tied. Don't make kids you can't take care of. All right? Don't father and mother children that you can't raise correctly. I understand that not everybody's in a position to always do this, but the ideal ought to be, you've got these little kids here, little creatures that you brought into the world. You owe them something.
You got to be honest about the trade-offs. Don't say that it's because you're not qualified. Don't say that it's because.
Don't use that as an excuse.
Don't say it's because the teachers are better. Don't all this other shit. You know, you just got to understand this is where we're at. And if you choose to put your kids in school, there are trade-offs, and if you that could be addressed by keeping them at home. You know, so there's the information. It's all out there. You know, we had the guy on the board who was giving the standard, everything we talked about, the socialization, all this shit. You know, and then he I don't know if it's a he or a she, whatever, but this person went and said, I looked at the research and you guys are right.
You guys are right. I was wrong.
Yeah,
he was just parroting what he'd been taught, and more importantly, he was parroting the conventional wisdom that you've been taught.
Exactly,
and it's wrong. Okay. Homeschool kids are at an advantage. They have an advantage over government school kids in every measurable parameter. Now, that would tell you something about what you ought to do. Right? All right, now, here's what the haters are going to say. Rip doesn't have any kids. Rip doesn't have any skin in the game. Well, yeah, I do. I got a whole bunch of money in the game. Okay? I've been paying taxes on kids that I don't have to educate in a substandard way for decades. More importantly, I have a business where we're trying to have coaches. We need coaches desperately. The demand for what we do exceeds the supply. And every young person that comes into this program that is better prepared is more likely to do a good job for us as a starting strength coach. Okay, everybody that lives in this society is terribly interested in having the best people come out of that society that they can get. And the public schools are not doing their job any more than any other government entity does. They're not doing their job. The government schools are substandard. And I don't see a way to fix them. So the way to fix the situation is for individuals to assume the responsibility for educating their kids. The responsibility they actually have, but they've been willing to cede to the government. Don't do that. Don't do that. It's your job to do better for your kids than that. Thanks for talking to us about this today, Nick. This is a serious topic, and I hope we've provoked some thought in some of you people that are watching this, and maybe we've helped some of you move in the right direction on something like this. Okay, thanks for joining us on Starting Strength Radio. We'll see you next time.